Ready to dive into another exciting edition of, where we dig through these city council agendas.
Absolutely. I'm always amazed at what we find buried in these documents. It's like a crash course in municipal mysteries.
This week, we're taking a look at the Portsmouth City Council's upcoming meeting. And let me tell you, just skimming through this agenda, I'm already seeing some things that make me go, that's interesting.
Oh, yeah. Like what? Give me the highlights.
Well, for starters, there's this resolution to accept rates and levy taxes 2024. Sounds pretty standard, right?
On the surface, sure. But it's the first domino in a whole chain of budget decisions.
Exactly. And get this. The city is looking to rake in, wait for it, $1,929,000 in property taxes.
Okay, that's a significant chunk of change. But how does that number actually break down? Where's all that money going?
That's the million-dollar question, or I guess the $1.9 million question, right? And luckily for us, that's where this handy-dandy Schedule A comes in. Think of it like the city's shopping list.
I'm intrigued. So what's on the shopping list this year? What are some of the big ticket items? Or in this case, maybe more like line-itemed items?
Right. Well, they've got allocations for everything under the sun, street repairs, the police pension fund, you name it. It's all there in black and white.
Okay, but we have to talk about the elephant in the room, or at least the elephant in the budget. How much of that $1.9 million is actually going towards those police pensions? Making sure the people who keep our streets safe are taken care of down the line.
All right, get this, $80,000.
$80,000.
You heard me right.
Wow. That seems, incredibly low considering, everything. I mean, that's a drop in the bucket compared to the total tax revenue.
Yeah, and that's what makes me go, is that enough to keep the pension fund solvent? What happens if it runs dry? These are the questions we need to be asking.
Absolutely. These seemingly boring budget numbers, they have very real consequences down the road. And frankly, that $80,000 figure, it definitely raises more questions than it answers.
Speaking of money and where it all goes, this next document has interesting written all over it. Or beat impound auction proceeds accept, and prop.pdf, it involves seized vehicles, and a cool $23,851. I smell a story.
Oh, absolutely. This one is a nice little window into how law enforcement operations are sometimes funded. We're not just talking about getting a good deal on a used car here.
Right. So break it down for me. What happens to that $23,851?
Okay, so this figure represents the proceeds from auctioning off 4 vehicles. Now, these weren't just any vehicles. They were seized by the Southern Ohio Drug Task Force.
Interesting. So crime doesn't pay, but catching criminals can fund more crime fighting.
In a way, yes. The breakdown is pretty interesting. $10,530 goes directly to the Law Enforcement Trust Fund, and then the remaining $13,321 goes to the Police Department's Impound Miscellaneous Fund.
So hypothetically, if I were in the market for, say, a slightly used sedan with a, shall we say, colorful history,
You could theoretically snag a deal at a police auction. However, this is about way more than just offloading some cars. It's about how those funds then circle back and support the efforts to keep the community safe.
that's a good point. Okay, so from seized vehicles to what looks like playground politics. This next document, Mound Park Playground Project appropriation.pdf, has my attention.
A playground. What could be controversial about a playground?
Well, for starters, they're looking at spending $24,000 for a topographic survey and greeting plans.
Whoa, $24,000 to figure out where the slide goes. That does seem a little steep. This isn't just some kids drawing in the sandbox. This is serious business.
Right. And to make things even juicier, there's this group, the Hilltop Initiative Group, and they're the ones listed as, and I quote, fundraising spearheading.
Fundraising spearheading. That's quite the phrase, isn't it?
It definitely makes you wonder, is there some tension there?
Absolutely. Is this a group of passionate parents just trying to make a difference? Or is there a deeper power struggle playing out over the future of Mound Park?
Okay, so let me get this straight. We've got potential pension shortfalls, crime-fighting cars being auctioned off, and now playground politics. This city council meeting is shaping up to be way more exciting than I initially thought.
You're starting to get it. These agendas, they're like a window into the soul of a city.
And it all comes back to that very first document we talked about, Resolution to Accept Rates and Levy Taxes 2024. That $1,929,000 in property taxes, that's the foundation everything else is built on.
Think of it like this. Every dollar has to be stretched to cover all those things. The police pensions, the street repairs, even that playground survey. It highlights the balancing act a city has to do to meet everyone's needs.
It's amazing how much goes into it. And speaking of that balancing act, you mentioned earlier that this $1.9 million figure has to operate within some specific limitations in Ohio, right?
Right. We're talking about the 10 mil limitation. Basically, it's a cap on how much cities in Ohio can collect in property taxes. Anything above that 10 mil limit usually needs voter approval.
So are you saying that $1.9 million isn't even enough to cover everything?
You hit the nail on the head. The city needs an additional $779,000 from taxes outside that 10 mil limit to balance the books. So even for something as simple as fixing a pothole or upgrading a playground, those tax dollars only go so far.
It's incredible how much we take for granted. Like, I never really thought about where the money for a playground even came from.
Most people don't, right? But that's the beauty of these deep dives. We're taking these seemingly boring documents and uncovering the fascinating stories they tell.
And more importantly, we're seeing how those stories connect to our everyday lives, even something as simple as a playground. So, what's the big takeaway here? What have we learned?
We've learned that behind every budget number, there's a story waiting to be told. A story about a community's needs, priorities, and the tough choices that have to be made with limited resources. And those stories, they're happening in your city too.
That's right. So next time you see a city council agenda, don't just toss it aside. Take a look. You might be surprised at what you find. Until next time.
Just a short break. We want to thank our business sponsors. Roger Hemming Contractors, Southern Ohio Overhead Doors and Fencing, Jenkins Family Enterprises, and Tiny Taters Daycare. Also, a huge shout out to our wonderful kids learning journalism through Wings of Hope. Please support these businesses and organizations. Please consider subscribing to the SCDN evening newsletter. Thank you so much for supporting our local business for all of these years. We're number one for a reason. And that reason is you. Now, back to the program.
We're diving into the Portsmouth City Council meeting on September 23rd. You want to be in the loop, right? Ready for those key votes?
Absolutely. We're getting you prepped with all the context so you're already ahead of the game before they even start.
We've got the agenda, of course, the usual starting point, but we've also snagged something even better. The inside memos on each agenda item. Behind-the-scenes stuff.
Yeah, these memos are gold. They give you the why behind the decisions, which you won't find on that dry agenda.
First up, we got acceptance of tuition fee from SSU for fire department. On the surface, sounds like your typical boring bookkeeping, huh?
You'd think so, but Memo CM2475 actually reveals this refund is because a firefighter dropped out. A whole paramedic course at Shawnee State, that's a $5,100 tuition refund.
Oh, now that's interesting. So for folks at home listening, what kind of questions should this be raising before the meeting?
Well, first off, you got to think bigger picture. Is Portsmouth short on paramedics? Is this one firefighter just a fluke? Or is it a symptom of a larger problem?
Right. And budget-wise, what's the impact?
Exactly. Does the fire department have to scramble to fill that training slot, spend more money? You might even want to jot those questions down, maybe even ask at the meeting, be an informed citizen.
Love that. All right, moving on. Item number 2, we've got trash can replacement. Replacing city trash cans. Doesn't exactly sound exciting at first glance, right?
True, but there might be more to this than meets the eye. City manager Sam Sutherland, he really wants this approved ASA, like really fast-tracked. The memo, CM2476, even says customers waiting on cans, so there's already a backlog, people are waiting.
Okay, so there's some urgency here. And they're asking for $32,000 with a whole month wait time. What's so special about these trash cans? Are they, like, platinum plated?
Good question. The memo doesn't get into specifics about the trash cans themselves, but that long wait, that could be supply chain issues. We've seen this affecting cities everywhere.
So this simple trash can thing could actually be a sign of bigger procurement problems for Portsmouth.
You got it. It's all connected.
Okay, makes sense. On to agenda item number 3 now. Cindy Seacrest Park appropriation. New playground. Sounds fun, but whoa, that's a $325,000 price tag?
And hold on, there's more. CM2477 says this is just part of the cost. They're hoping to secure another $200,000 in grants on top of that.
So it's not just about if they build it, it's also how they're paying for it.
Exactly. And knowing they're going after grants, that tells you something. City councils, they're always juggling limited funds, lots of needs. This gives you a peek into their strategy.
It's like a puzzle. All these little pieces.
And
And speaking of puzzles, we've got those discussion items on the agenda. Both seem to be coming from Councilmember Dunn. Interesting.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. Both about housing, but from different angles.
Yeah, it's like they're tackling the housing situation on multiple fronts at once.
Uh-huh.
Let's unpack this, starting with the code enforcement one. What do you make of the city wanting to bring in more staff, even part-time?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's like hiring administrative staff, even starting at part-time to assist code enforcement.
Right, exactly.
And then the other one, hiring outside municipal advising to instruct the city on zoning regarding recovery housing. Both about housing, huh? But like you said, totally different approaches.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to tackle this housing situation from all sides. Let's unpack this, starting with that code enforcement one.
Yeah.
What do you make of the city wanting to bring in more staff, even on a part-time basis?
Well, it tells me code enforcement is becoming a much bigger deal, which begs the question, why now? What's going on?
Right, like is there a huge backlog of complaints they're trying to catch up on?
Exactly. Or are they going to get way more strict with enforcement going forward?
Either way, something's changing. So for our listeners, what should they be really paying attention to during this discussion at the meeting?
Listen to what the council members are actually saying, what are their concerns?
Yeah, like what are they worried about?
Exactly. Are they worried about safety violations, property values, blight? What's their angle?
Right. Their comments will tell you a lot about what's really driving this whole thing.
Totally. And don't forget, it could be pressure from people living in those neighborhoods, Or maybe this is a pet project for someone Council Member Dunn, since his name is right there on the agenda.
Right. Gotta love a good hunch, right? Okay, now on to that second discussion item. Hiring outside municipal, advising to instruct the city on zoning regarding recovery housing. This one feels extra complex.
Definitely. Recovery housing, it's so important for communities, but it comes with its own zoning headaches.
Like, how do you balance providing these essential services while also addressing any concerns from the community?
Exactly. And I think that's why Portsmouth is going the outside expert route. Hey, this is complicated. There are legal things, social things. We need help navigating this.
Yeah, that makes sense. But what does zoning regarding recovery housing even mean, really?
Oh, it's more than just picking a spot on the map for these places, that's for sure.
Right, like where it's okay to have one and where it's not.
Yeah. Zoning, it controls all sorts of things, like how big these homes can be, how many people can live there.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
And even what kind of services they can offer, who they're allowed to serve. It gets really specific.
So it's a lot to consider then. It's not just about finding a solution that looks good on paper. It's about making sure everyone feels safe and supported.
100%. So when you're at that meeting, here's what to listen for.
Okay, I'm taking notes.
Pay attention to the words they use, the council members. Are they hung up on the legal stuff about zoning? Or are they actually talking about how these decisions will impact real people in the community?
Right, like are they thinking about the human side of it all?
Exactly. Do they sound empathetic to the folks in recovery? Or are they just focused on the logistics and the laws?
It's about reading between the lines.
Yes, because at the end of the day, it's not just about rules on a page. It's about how Portsmouth chooses to support its most vulnerable residents.
You've given us a lot to think about. Now, before we move on, let's go back to those first three agenda items. The tuition refund, the trash cans, the playground. They seem like separate things, but I feel like there's a connection there,
We're on to something.
Yeah.
It's all about the budget, right? Like how the city's spending its money.
Exactly. We talked about that firefighter dropping out, the trash can delays, the playground needing grant funding.
Right. It seems random, but it all ties back to the city's resources, how much they have, where it's going.
Yeah, and that tuition refund, it's not just about one less firefighter. It could mean they're having a hard time keeping people in those jobs.
Absolutely. And that has a ripple effect, Imagine if it takes longer for the fire department to respond to emergencies.
Oh, gosh.
Because they're short-staffed or they have to cut back somewhere else to pay for recruitment. Suddenly, a small detail like that refund becomes a much bigger deal.
Exactly. And it makes you think about those trash cans, right? $32,000, that's probably nothing compared to the whole city budget. But that month-long wait, what if that's happening with other things too, other city services?
Right. It makes you wonder what else they're having trouble getting because of these supply chain problems everyone's talking about.
Yeah. Are there other projects on hold? Things they just can't get their hands on?
That's the question. And it makes you pay attention to what the council focuses on, What are their priorities when things are tight?
Right. And speaking of priorities, that playground, Cindy Seacrest Park. I mean, new playgrounds are great, don't get me wrong, but $325,000 plus needing another $200,000 in grants on top of that.
Yeah, that tells you they're really stretching to make ends meet, you know?
Yeah, like every dollar counts.
Exactly. So it's not just about building a playground, it's about, okay, if we do this, what else are we not doing?
What has to give?
Exactly. Tough choices.
It's all connected, isn't it?
It is. So to everyone listening, heading to that city council meeting on the 23rd, remember, you're not just there to listen to a bunch of boring stuff. You're there to understand what's really going on.
Be it, detective?
Exactly. Connect the dots. Why are they asking these questions? What arguments are they responding to?
What gets them excited? What makes them hesitate?
Because that's how you figure out what they really care about, you know?
Yeah,
What their vision is for Portsmouth.
love it.
And don't forget, your voice matters too. Ask those questions, share your thoughts, hold those elected officials accountable.
Yes.